Hi everyone, this is Kelsey from ShopVue, and I'll be walking you through our Shop Activity Details dashboard. This is an all-time data dashboard, meaning that we can take a look at both historical and recent data. It focuses on 4 key metrics: overall labor efficiency, or OLE, efficiency, utilization, and quality. Right now we're taking a look at the first sheet called Department Activity, and at the top of the sheet we have a couple of filters here like year to date, week to date, and last 28 days, as well as this date range selector where we can select a specific date range. There's a shift selector where we can select one or more shifts, and a text box to always let the front end user know the date range of data that they're looking at. The departments table here lists all of our departments as well as these 4 key metrics and some more information like labor hours, quantity good and scrap, indirect setup and run hours. Below this table is an indirect Pareto chart displaying the sum of indirect hours by department. We can also switch this view and look at it by the sum of indirect hours by indirect reason. On the right side of this sheet we have our 4 gauges here displaying the average of these metrics. We have a KPI calling out the sum of labor hours versus indirect hours and the sum of quantity good versus scrap. Below is a Workcenter table giving us the same information as this department table down to the Workcenter level. So we have the same columns in this table here. There's a labor metrics bar chart where we can compare how our 4 key metrics are doing over time. So you can see we can compare the day-to-day analysis or by month. We can also take a look and see how we did from quarter to quarter as well as by year. Jumping to the next sheet, we can now look at this data from the Workcenter Activity point of view, where we have our main table here taking a look at work centers and our subtable looking at machines. The indirect Pareto chart is now looking at the Workcenter indirect. And jumping into the part activity sheet, you'll notice we no longer have OLE or utilization. We now have this new metric called setup. So in our parts table, we do have that new metric set up in here as well as those other columns we've seen throughout. Below is a scrap Pareto chart summing up the quantity of scrap by part. On the right side of the sheet we have our new setup metric as well as a labor hours KPI comparing labor hours to setup hours, and an orders table showing our order and step description and those standard columns we've seen throughout this dashboard. Jumping into the next sheet, we have our employee activity sheet. On this sheet, we can filter by employee ID, employee, or pay group. And again, we have the same columns in this main table here. Below is an employee indirect where we can see which employees are producing or are working in the most indirect hours, as well as the standard indirect by reason Pareto chart. Next sheet is going to look a little bit different. We now have this card style view, which is really great for displaying in monitors. And this is going to, at a glance, allow us to see the numbers for each department. This text box up here will let us know which departments that we're looking at, and again a text box to display the date range. If I click on one department here, you'll see this text box now changes. We're looking at our D2 or fabrication department. We can jump into the next display, which is going to show us a list of work centers. Right now we're looking at the work centers within our department D2, but I can go ahead and clear that filter. And now I can see all of my work centers and their metrics. Jumping into the next sheet, we have our employee OLE. And now on this sheet, we have some advanced filtering options. So we can click on that and open up some more filters. Here we can filter by home department, by employee ID, by assigned shift or pay group. We can multi-select in any of these filters throughout click just by dragging our mouse. We can also search for specific values. I'm going to collapse this advanced filter here, and I can see all of my employees and how they're doing with these metrics. Here's our labor details sheet. You'll see on the left we have all of the same filters we've seen throughout the dashboard, as well as this new image here that allows the user to take a look at how these formulas are calculated. The pivot table below provides us with tons of information and details on what's happening in our departments or our work centers, so we can use any of these guys here to filter. So let's say we want to look at just one department. We can open up these pivots here. You can move around the order of all of these fields. So we can open up a specific work center. That will bring us to our direct labor transactions, downtime, indirect, things like that. So we can open up our direct labor, look at a specific transaction or order, sorry. Then we can click on by date, by part, and lastly by employee. So we can see all of the details here, like quantity, good, and scrap, those 4 key metrics. And if we open up our indirect labor transaction, we can click on a specific date, and if there was an indirect reason, we would see our indirect reason here.